as at 4:32 a.m. in Praia Grande. A security camera captures a man walking into a lethal trap. He thinks he is saving his marriage, but he is the final obstacle in a twisted love triangle. Behind a digital lock, his wife, sister, and best friend wait to trade blood for greed. The silence of the fourth floor is shattered by 40 stabs, a savage display of overkill. And beneath a collapsing mirrored wardrobe, a successful life is violently erased. His final words, "You traitors," stand as a defining testament to his double betrayal. Was this sudden rage, or a tragedy where the closest hearts proved the most lethal? This is the story of Igor Perto. For over an hour, the fourth floor of the building remains silent. Then, at 5:40 a.m., the motion detectors triggered again. His wife, Rafaela, emerged from the apartment alone. She walked to the elevator with a chilling composure, descended to the garage, and drove away at 5:42 a.m. Exactly 13 seconds later, a second car pulled up to the gate. Inside were two men whose fates were already sealed. 27-year-old businessman Igor Perto and his best friend, Mario Vitorino. As they stepped into the elevator at 5:44 a.m., Igor appeared agitated, his hands gesturing as he spoke to the man he had trusted with his business, his secrets, and his family. He did not know that his wife had just passed him in the dark. He didn't know that the apartment door he was about to enter was a threshold to his own execution. The silence of the building was shattered an hour later when neighbors reported the sounds of a violent struggle. By the time the military police arrived at the scene, the apartment was a tomb. Because the occupants would not answer, officers were forced to call a locksmith to break the seal of the fourth floor unit. The moment the doors swung open, the clinical atmosphere of the hallway was replaced by the overwhelming scent of copper. A trail of dark, viscous stains began in the corridor, winding through the living and dining rooms like a gruesome map of a desperate flight. Furniture was upended, and personal items were scattered, suggesting a hurricane of violence had torn through the space. Following the trail to the bedroom, investigators found the body of Igor Perto. He was lying near the window, surrounded by the remnants of his life. The forensic report would later reveal a level of brutality that stunned even veteran detectives. Igor had been stabbed at least 40 times. The wounds were not surgical. They were a chaotic explosion of rage, targeting his chest, head, and back. Experts noted that the severity of the strikes was so extreme that had he survived the initial onslaught, he would have spent the rest of his life paralyzed from the neck down. In the bathroom, investigators recovered the murder weapon, a standard kitchen knife crusted with dried blood. It had been grabbed from a kitchen drawer that was still hanging half open, a silent testament to the urgency of the killer. Understanding the ferocity with which Igor Perto was erased requires an examination of the successful life he had meticulously constructed. At only 27 years old, Igor epitomized the image of a self-made success in Praia Grande, Brazil. He was a prominent businessman and the proud owner of a thriving car dealership that had officially opened its doors in 2022. His digital presence was a curated gallery reflecting a man deeply in love with his achievements and his family, featuring photographs of luxury vehicles alongside constant glowing tributes to his wife, Rafaela Costa da Silva. Just 1 month prior to his murder, on July 16th, Igor published a public declaration of love to celebrate Rafaela's birthday. In these final posts, he spoke passionately about building a life by her side and adoring her more with each passing day, expressing a sincere desire to be part of her dreams forever. He operated under the firm belief that his inner circle of family and friends constituted an unbreakable fortress of stability and mutual support. However, beneath this surface of success, Igor was a man actively working to mend developing cracks in that foundation. He had recently begun staying at his mother's residence following a period of significant turbulence and a brief separation in his marriage. Despite these challenges, he remained a dedicated father to his 5-year-old son and was widely described by those close to him as a generous individual who did everything for everyone. Tragically, it was this very sense of loyalty and trust that his closest associates ultimately weaponized to facilitate his destruction. The investigation into the death of Igor Perto quickly moved away from the possibility of a random attack and solidified into a closed-circle mystery centering on the three individuals closest to him: his wife, Rafaela Costa da Silva, his sister, Marceli Perto, and his brother-in-law, Mario Vitorino. This was far from a conventional case of infidelity. It was a complex blood triangle that defied standard morality. Mario Vitorino was not just Igor's closest friend and brother-in-law, but also his primary business partner in a local motorcycle dealership. While Mario was legally married to Igor's sister Marceli, he was also deeply involved in a secret romantic affair with Igor's wife, Rafaela. The betrayal reached even further within the family unit when evidence surfaced suggesting that Marceli, Igor's own blood, had also been romantically intimate with Rafaela in the apartment just moments before the two men arrived. While defense attorneys argued that Marceli was merely dazed and under the influence of alcohol during the struggle, the prosecution presented a much more calculated narrative. The Sao Paulo State Public Prosecutor's Office, MPSP, alleged that the trio collectively viewed Igor as an inconvenient obstacle to their unconventional love triangle. Beyond the emotional entanglements, the investigation highlighted a powerful financial incentive for the crime. With Igor removed, Mario was positioned to assume total leadership of their motorcycle shop, while Rafaela stood to inherit his dealership and substantial estate. Even Marceli was expected to benefit from the reshuffling of the family's wealth, making Igor's death a lucrative outcome for all three suspects. The events of the night of August 30th began at a family birthday party, where the atmosphere appeared festive despite the underlying betrayals. Following the celebration, Igor intended to take a ride-sharing service to his mother's home, where he had been staying after a disagreement with his wife, but Mario Vitorino insisted on driving him personally. During the journey, the discovery of the affair was triggered by a phone call from Igor's wife, Rafaela, which was broadcast across the car's Bluetooth infotainment system. This unexpected contact at approximately 3 a.m. caused Igor to realize that his wife and best friend were betraying him. A heated confrontation ensued, as Igor demanded an explanation for the call, which Mario fumbled, while Rafaela ignored Igor's subsequent attempts to reach her. Using a family location sharing app, Igor discovered that Rafaela was not at home, but at his sister Marceli's apartment. Consumed by fury and a sense of double betrayal, Igor ordered Mario to drive directly to that location to confront them. Unknown to Igor, he was heading toward a fatal ambush, as Mario sent a warning message to Rafaela before they arrived. The precision of the crime is what haunts investigators. As Mario and Igor approached the building, Rafaela was already inside with Marceli. At 5:40 a.m., she received a signal, or made a choice. She exited the apartment just as the two men were entering the garage. The 13-second gap between her departure and their arrival was not an accident. It was a transition. Rafaela sat in her car outside the building, waiting. She didn't leave the area immediately. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began a series of Google searches that revealed the coldness of her intent. How long does it take for a body to smell? And how long for a body to decompose? Meanwhile, on the 4th floor, the door opened. Marceli, who later claimed she was asleep or in another room, was the one who controlled the digital lock. The lock's internal audit showed it was open from the inside to let the men in. Igor walked into the room where his sister waited, followed closely by the man holding a kitchen knife. Neighbors on the 4th floor of the residential building became the unintended witnesses to the violent final moments of Igor Perto's life, reporting a blazing row that shattered the early morning silence. These witnesses recounted hearing Igor's voice thick with heartbreak as he confronted the scale of his betrayal, reportedly screaming, "What was the point of all this? I try so hard. I always did this for everyone. You traitors, bastards." During this outburst, he expressed profound disappointment in those he trusted, shouting that they had all been plotting against him while he remained the only one left in the dark. Witnesses described Igor as being extremely agitated, repeatedly shouting slurs against his wife as the realization of her infidelity became clear. The auditory timeline captured a chilling transition. The shouting and commotion steadily decreased in volume until it eventually stopped. This brutal effort to erase Igor completely involved an explosion of raw aggression that forensic experts noted as overkill. Following the struggle, neighbors observed that Mario Vitorino appeared notably calm, while Marceli Perretto was heard screaming and begging for the violence to cease, a detail her defense team would later highlight to argue her lack of criminal intent. However, forensics confirmed that the unarmed Igor was trapped and subjected to cruel means involving approximately 40 stab wounds. At 6:04 a.m., just 20 minutes after entering, Mario and Marceli bolted from the apartment. They didn't use the elevator. They raced down the stairs to the basement, slipping out through the garage on foot. They drove to Mario's apartment, stayed for 5 minutes to grab bags, and then vanished into the morning light. By 8:48 a.m., the three suspects, Mario, Marceli, and Rafaela, met at a gas station on the Governor Carvalho Pinto Highway. It was a rendezvous of conspirators where Rafaela abandoned her car and climbed into Mario's vehicle. However, a rift began to form in the blood triangle. Mario allegedly did not want Marceli to accompany them on the run. He dropped the victim's sister off at a gas station, instructing her to return to Praia Grande and inform the family about Igor's death, a move intended to buy the lovers more time. Mario and Rafaela then fled toward the interior of the state, checking into a motel in Pindamonhangaba. While they were off the radar, they weren't idle. They allegedly withdrew 100,000 Brazilian real from the business account he shared with Igor, funding their life as fugitives. The trio believed they could outrun the law, but they couldn't outrun their digital footprints. Police extraction of cell phone data revealed that Rafaela and Mario remained together for days, orchestrating their next steps. A Samsung phone seized from Mario showed that Rafaela was in possession of it during their hideout in Torrinha. She had sent multiple audio messages to various people using her lover's device, completely contradicting her later statement that she had no contact with him after the motel. Perhaps the most damning evidence was the search history. In the minutes after Igor was being slaughtered, Rafaela wasn't calling for an ambulance. She was researching how long it would take for his body to attract attention from the smell. The crumbling of the suspects' narratives began in earnest as they were taken into custody following the murder. Rafaela Costa da Silva and Marceli Perretto turned themselves into authorities on September 6, 2024, while Mario Vitorino was eventually tracked down and apprehended on September 15th at a safe house belonging to Rafaela's uncle. To navigate the conflicting testimonies provided by the accused, the civil police employed an innovative and highly visual approach by creating a comic book reconstruction of the crime. This expert report utilized photo novel and graphic elements, including speech bubbles, captions, and onomatopoeia like vupt and chuff, to illustrate and analyze the versions of events provided by the suspects. Mario Vitorino attempted to rely on a classic self-defense plea, alleging that Igor had initiated the violence by smashing a mirror and threatening him with a shard of glass. He claimed that his retaliatory actions were a result of fearing for his life. Simultaneously, Marceli Perretto presented herself as a distressed bystander, claiming she was either asleep or merely begging the men to stop their fight. However, the forensic evidence meticulously dismantled these claims. The reconstruction and medical findings proved that Igor was pinned down by a heavy mirrored wardrobe, rendering him completely unable to defend himself as he was subjected to the final, brutal attack. The legal proceedings surrounding the death of Igor Perto took a turn in October 2025 that ignited widespread public outrage across Brazil. While the court ruled that Mario Vitorino and Marceli Perretto would remain in custody to face a jury trial for first-degree intentional homicide, the judge reached a highly controversial conclusion regarding the victim's widow, Rafaela Costa da Silva. Despite her admitted romantic involvement with the other suspects and her presence during the initial escape, the judge determined there was no solid evidence proving she participated in the premeditation of the murder or that she lured Igor to the apartment. Because she was physically outside the building when the 40 stab wounds were inflicted, the court revoked her pretrial detention, allowing her to be released from custody while awaiting trial. The Perto family expressed profound anger and disbelief at this decision. Igor's brother, Tiago Perto, a local city council member, was especially vocal, having previously hired private investigators and publicly labeled his own sister, Marceli, a monster for her role in the betrayal. The family continues to demand the maximum sentence for those involved, viewing the crime as a permanent severance of blood ties that can never be forgiven, regardless of the court's decision to grant Rafaela her freedom during the ongoing legal process. The legacy of the Igor Perto case is not just about a murder. It is about the total collapse of the family unit. This was a Greek tragedy played out in the age of Bluetooth and GPS. Tiago Perto later shared a piece of family footage that became a symbol of the betrayal. In the video, Igor's young son is celebrating his birthday. The little boy, beaming with pride, carefully cuts the first slice of his cake. Following tradition, he offers it to the most important person in the room, his favorite aunt, Marceli. The same aunt who, years later, would open the door for the man who ended his father's life. As of 2026, Mario Vittorino and Marceli Perto remain behind bars, awaiting the final verdict of a jury. Rafaela remains in the shadow of the law, a free woman for now, but one whose name is forever linked to the blood triangle. Igor Perto's story ended in a cold bedroom, with 40 stabs delivered by the hands he once considered his sanctuary. His death silenced a man who lived for his family, leaving a legacy of betrayal that shattered the Perto name. When blood ties and friendship dissolve for greed and passion, we must ask if justice can ever truly mend the damage. We are left with the haunting image of a son offering cake to the aunt who opened the door to his father's execution. If stories that challenge our understanding of loyalty and inner circle darkness matter to you, stay with us. Subscribe and turn on notifications to join us for more deep dives into the cases that define our world. Because in the shadows of true crime, the deepest betrayals are always the ones closest to home.